The natural world reflects the Creator. The smells of wildflowers when they come into bloom in the high country in July or something, and they all have, for me, a spiritual connection.
For so long, I prayed the Lord would send me as a missionary to Yellowstone. He's like, no, you get to go to the city. What do you do when you don't have a screen in front of you? I keep trying to threaten myself I'm going to go back to a flip phone, but I've slaved myself to my phone. I say that, and
my wife just kind of shakes her head.
Yeah.
But the unexamined life is not worth living. So, wherever you are, always pay attention, because there's messages everywhere.
Hey, friends and family, thank you so much for tuning in to the Aleph After Hours podcast. Today is an exciting day because we are honored and privileged to have Rob Mazza with us this afternoon. And we're just coming off of the Awakening Wonder Conference we had here at CCS this weekend. And Rob is just telling me how the only thing he regrets is he could have had another session or two to share some more words. And so, no, we have used Rob and squeezed him dry. And so, but today is just a conversation with Rob, a little bit about just personal stuff, kind of things the Lord, and, we'll segue into sheep probably at some minute. And,
sheep or
ducks.
Hunting elk with the least amount of pride in
yeah, that's a great story that we were sharing before. But anyway, so Rob, introduce yourself a little bit and tell us who you are.
Okay, thanks, Scott, for the invite and being here, and I'm glad I don't have to have notes.
No.
So I might get something wrong. But I live with my lovely wife of 41 years in northern Idaho, just on the edge of Coeur d'Alene, little town. And I don't know. I don't know what I want to tell you. Tell you something. Well, but we live in a small. Actually, I'll talk about my neighborhood because place is important. We live in a kind of a small neighborhood where the sidewalks end and the speed limit drops to 25, and it's kind of like Leave It to Beaverland or somewhere, a throwback. Families still walk around, and
so it's like a suburb neighborhood.
Yeah, it's a little suburb neighborhood, but people own anything from an acre to 5.5 acres, you can have these little, At one time, we raised like 7 sheep to mow an acre and a half, but then my next neighbor on one side has a bunch of horses and everything else, and then you skip over to the other neighbor, and they used to have alpaca, and so there's just this surreal effect of urban / rural.
It's a good mix.
Yeah, it is. It's really
alpaca.
Nice. Yeah.
My brother almost bought a herd of alpaca once. It was
really, why in the world?
Yeah, I know. It was interesting. This is like barter system. But anyway.
Yeah, it's like if you have an infatuation with Dr. Seuss, you should buy alpaca.
Yeah, well, and I guess they have really soft fur. I guess, what do they call it? Not wool.
No, it's really valuable soft.
Yeah, and now, Peru has a lot of good alpaca stuff. Yeah. But you live in a really good neighborhood then, because if you have all those, wildlife animals and a mix of families walking around.
Yeah, I like Idaho. It was a move from, we lived for like 34 years in Montana, either really in the mountains outside of Bozeman on the way to Yellowstone Park, in a little log cabin for like 10, 11 years.
Did you just was that your land, like your property, your family land, or did you rent it, or like?
I rented it.
Okay.
And it was for something like $30 a month forever.
Oh my God.
It's like, but I don't know, it fit us. We just, until we got to like age up in our 40s where we didn't want to sit over an outhouse hole and 20 below zero weather in the winter.
Yeah. So was there like roads leading up there, or like was it easy to get to town?
Major highway leading to Yellowstone Park is right there. And it's right along the way to Big Sky, but this was Big Sky in the days when it wasn't very well developed, where in the wintertime, for example, if you ran out of firewood, I could remember the days when we would fall trees right across the highway at one of us would look out and the other one would clear the road. So
And then people get
so
out
it was,
there.
it was a wild area.
Well,
back
but
then.
that was strategy because you fall the tree on the road, and then the drivers have to get out and cut it up, right? So they did the work for you.
If we were smart, but there were no drivers coming down the road.
Okay.
And not that many in the wintertime because the ski area wasn't that developed. And,
Wow.
so Big Sky's a big deal now. It's
like
playground for
Jordan's-
the wealthy
yeah.
and everyone else.
All those areas, it's just it's amazing how they're exploding with the wealthy people. There's a place not far from here, like Langley, Arkansas. It's like a Ouachita National Forest up there. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's our mountains. You'd call them probably hills. But all these people from the West are moving in and buying up the land. It's just beautiful. But, now the market value, you can't.
Right.
You can barely rent a house up there now, probably.
Right.
And so
there ain't no $30 a month rent in Big Sky area any longer.
No, that's why I was asking. I was like, man, Rob has a good inheritance, or he has a good deal.
Yeah.
So you guys are like from Connecticut. Your dad and mom, correct? Because you were telling a story the other day where you would go back to Connecticut.
Yeah. I was born and raised there until I pulled up stakes about age maybe 22, 23, something like that.
So you just went to Montana. You said, I want to go to Montana? Or how did you get to Montana?
Oh, that's a great story. I had this dream of hiking the Appalachian Trail. And
The whole thing.
well, the whole thing, but what I could manage at the time was to bite off a chunk of it, 550 miles.
Wow.
And so I started in Shenandoah Park, Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And I really didn't know anything about hardcore long-distance camping, so my equipment was really amusing. But I started there and then pretty much walked straight for, I think it was 5.5 weeks. I don't know, it was a long time.
Wow.
But I walked all the way to Connecticut.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long
alone.
did that? 5.5 weeks?
Yeah, I'm trying to get the time scale now. It kind of.
Then you stop in those they have like these cities that are, or like towns that are kind of like refilling stations along the way.
Yeah, as far as like a semi-wilderness experience, it's really good for that because you're crossing towns. And, you can hitchhike down back in those days. Hitchhiking was really great.
Yeah.
You can do it anytime and, restock and come up and, hit the trail again. And then you'd have these variety of people you'd intersect with. That was all part of it is they're all unique characters that want to hike long distance.
So did you read the book My Side of the Mountain?
I haven't.
You haven't?
Not
The
that.
Hatchet?
No.
Like you're like the epitome character from these books of just like, getting out in the. What about Thoreau, like Emerson?
Oh, yeah, I read Thoreau
Okay.
as a child of the 60s / 70s. So
Yeah.
I read.
Did those
I think.
influence, like those books, did they, I mean, because
Inspiring.
you're a writer, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're creative.
Yeah.
So did those books, like, do you feel like they, like, pulled you to, like, hey, I want to, like, disappear on the trails for 5.5 weeks or?
Yeah, or a whole life.
A whole life.
The goal was, because once you taste of that, it's like it's such an immersion into. What I didn't expect was all the Civil War parks along the way they hiked through. So that was an added bonus to
Really?
touch into that atmosphere of the Civil War and.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so you go through parks like that and. Plus the beauty of the Shenandoah Valley and, as a writer, and I didn't know I was a writer then, but, I had all these scrolls of things, Now it makes sense while I sang the song, Oh, Shenandoah, in grammar school or something,
You're seeing it visually.
Yeah, you're connecting with the land, the people, the history, and all that sort of thing.
What do you think that is? Like some people, they read like these books, like for you it's Thoreau and or Walden, I can't remember, and then for my generation, maybe My Side of the Mountain just talks about a kid escaping into living in the woods. There's something like fulfilling for some people about that.
Right.
And what is that call, that pull? Like, what do you think that is? Like, I'm just like, because I have it.
Yeah.
We went on an elk hunt in Chama, New Mexico. It's supposed to be a 4-day hunt. We got snowed in, and it turned into over a 2-week trapped in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. And
Yeah.
I'm with these people who are getting cabin fever and panicking, and I am like coming alive. I'm like
Right.
coming out of like my old skin, and I'm like, can this go on? I mean, I had to get back to my family, but I was like, if they were here and I had another 2 weeks, this would be ideal.
Yeah, I know exactly the feeling, and yeah, I don't know. It's a combination of things. I think for me, at the deepest level, it's a call to the land, and that's another segue that developed along the way, and I still haven't fully scratched that itch. But on another level, for I think a lot of guys, it's this being stripped down to limited resources, and it's really a legitimate thing. What can you do with limited resources in a beautiful place that you like being, and how long can you stay there, and can you survive with as much, I don't know, style or whatever as possible? You know what I mean?
You watch those YouTube videos of the guys who like go build their like little cabins in the woods?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
Or-
it just pulls you in, and you're like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. Or the Alone series. Some of that is really interesting. How
It's-
they choose 10 tools, and they're in the middle of Canadian wilderness,
Yeah.
and they got to survive.
We-
That still pulls on you. Yeah.
And you know, we do this. We typically once a year. I don't know if we did it last year. We do a hike where we take some young boys up to and a bunch of leaders up to Arkansas, and we do like this 30-mile loop, and we do it in like a weekend.
Yeah.
We call it the Boys to Men March. And because we listen to R&B the whole time, but but we
You just spoiled the vibe for me. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so- well, we don't, but it's it's amazing. Now the equipment is probably way better than when you were hiking the Appalachian Trail. I mean, it's amazing. Everything is light, but there's this whole world about how light can I go, and so now there's people who are like, they hike in, instead of using these nice little propane micro heaters, they'll like have their little alcohol stove, which just takes forever, but it's all about how many grams can I shed, what's the least amount of things I can. So now the kids, they only want to bring a tent. They want to sleep in a hammock. And those nice hammocks they have. And
Yeah, they have such options now.
but it's amazing. I mean, we do. We're spoiled compared to, you guys, who knows what you were hiking with the weight wise. But I mean, our guys bring in like a 20-pound bag, and they have more than enough. And that's including like their iPhone or I encourage them to leave it in the car. Most of them do. But we go and we hike this loop. It's called Eagle Rock Loop.
Yeah.
And they love it, and they realize they disconnect from. There is no service, so they have their phones for emergency stuff. But they disconnect. They connect with one another. They connect with the land, and hopefully they connect with the Lord.
Yeah.
And it's just the stress. I think it was Dallas Willard who talks about solitude, and he says, you can get away, but then it takes maybe a day for you to enter solitude, where all the worries of that life leave you as well.
Yeah, I was thinking there was, I don't know if it was a recent study, but somebody did a study about male-female set group in an urban environment, and then the same thing in a rural or wilderness environment. And the percentage of compassion toward humanity, somehow they measured this, was so much higher with those that spent significant time in a rural, even wilderness atmosphere.
Do you think that's because they're not getting jaded from running into people, or maybe
Maybe
that's me being jaded?
I think it's
asking
something about the mystery of the land giving its strength, and being in an undefiled area is less defilement. I mean, just thinking
100%.
what defiles land,
People.
Sexual sins and rebellion and anger and bloodshed, and the ultimate way of anger run its full course would be bloodshed, and all those kind of things that affect land. And our nest is very important to us. Our houses, our land.
When I lived in Bogota, Colombia for years, and and I grew up in a pretty rural area. I grew up in Bossier, across the river, and it was way underdeveloped compared to what it is today. I mean, I grew up, we'd ride four-wheelers across the street. There was lakes. We'd go catch alligators or fish, or go shoot our 22s at whatever. Anyway, I grew up with that kind of lifestyle, And so when I moved to Bogota, I mean, it is a dense city of, now it's probably over 9 million. And I'm just like, all of a sudden, like, this chaos is like, my inner condition was just like, someone scratching a record player.
Right.
And it was just, it created such an anxiety in me that my escape a lot of times, and I say a lot, but would be, on 2 occasions, I did a mission trip to the Amazons. And so we get to the Amazon,
Yeah.
I mean, and there's
Right.
nothing.
Yeah.
And I was like, home. There's mosquitoes, so it's like Louisiana. It's a swamp, so I mean, it was like being literally at home for me.
Yeah.
But I'm not used to I wasn't used to the city,
Yeah.
and it's you could feel like all that, like whatever, defilement, the spiritual atmosphere is completely different. And my wife she had never been to my hometown and knew where I came from, so when I talked about it, it was foreign concept because she grew up in the city.
Right. Right.
And so then we moved here, and you call this a city, but she calls it a little town. And it's like, oh, this is like a farm town. And I'm like, well, we're a city,
Yeah. I was just traveling back to your earlier question. What is it about that? And I think just to relate it to the nature of God and how the natural world reflects the Creator, Romans 1, right? There's a message there of the Creator all over the place, not just the gospel per se, but in various dimensions of the 7 days of creation. Yeah. So I think it really awakens your senses. You're no longer in cities, you're kind of very self-aware. You're in protective mode. You're aware of location and, this street, that street, and lights and people telling you what to do, more or less, and things that get your attention that are, consumerism and all this stuff rolled into one. And not that it's all bad or anything, but you are not stripped down to using your senses for this kind of pure palette where God can be revealed, if I can put it that way. So you sort of come alive. For me, it's a jumping off point for writing the smells of wildflowers when they come into bloom in the high country in July or something, and the sound of, meltwater or things like that. They all have, for me, a spiritual connection. I was going to, kind of segue back on Henry David Thoreau at a little story that just before I went to hitchhike to Montana, where I eventually lived, I spent a summer up in Dexter, Maine, outside of Dexter, Maine, and that's the closest point of wilderness to Connecticut. So I was on like 30 acres, and I was going to start to build a log cabin for a friend of mine. I was just looking to
How old were you at this point?
I was, I don't know, early 20s.
Oh, gosh, and you knew how to build a log cabin already?
Well,
no,
I had I tell you, I mean, I'm like, ready, aim, fire. I'm just a ready, fire kind of guy. Yeah. So, I had a couple books, and someone gave me a broad axe, and I had a hat. And someone gave me a chainsaw from the 1960s that weighed 58 pounds or something, And so I didn't do very well. I got the foundational logs up and, up about 3 or 4 courses. But I guess the point of the story is on the corner of the property was the inn that Thoreau stayed at. Remnants of the inn, it's just rubble, stone, but remnants of the inn that Thoreau stayed at on his book. I forget, the Voyages Through Maine or Passages, something to do with Maine.
Yeah.
And I always thought, I always talk about God in your prehistory.
Absolutely.
And to me, that was just another sign.
Like
God liked what I liked. Even Henry David Thoreau, a transcendentalist, but God was moving me into an understanding of God and creation and why it's so important. And I think I always take that as a sign. Because later, fast forwarding, I eventually moved to Montana. I remember one book really affecting me. It was called Pilgrim at Tinker's Creek, about a woman, Annie Dillard, who lived in Virginia, by a place called Tinker's Creek, and she chronicled a year living by this creek, and it was done in beautiful, spiritual, metaphorical language of the raw brutality of nature to the beauty of nature to where's God in all this kind of thing. Wow. And while I don't know where her belief system exactly was, I knew she had a certain reverence for God as creator in it. But the writing just killed me. I mean, I would just go buy these books and give them to people and go, this means something.
And that's
my pre-salvation days. This means something.
That's like your connection is like creative writing. I mean, and you do more than that, but like for you, you go read someone who's like this lady or Thoreau, and it's like something. It touches something deep in you. I mean, you connect to nature, but
yeah, and
do you feel like
eventually you come to the Lord, and then you enter the church, and it's like there's no grid for people relating to it.
Like, I mean, you said Henry David Thoreau, he was a transcendentalist, but it doesn't mean that there weren't truths that he was communicating.
Exactly.
I mean, he's like, well, you want dark light, whatever you want to call it. I mean, there was a truth in there. It was just covered up by wrong perspectives or whatever. Yeah. And so, I think you can find that in a lot of things. I mean, you do a lot in Burning Man, and I mean, it's like people who are all searching for a truth. They're just grabbing maybe the wrong thing, or it's manifesting in the wrong way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the way I teach it is, and I taught a lot on this weekend, was you look for the hunger in people, but then you look for, all right, God is in this hunger and this search for something beyond this present reality. Yeah, and it so much boils down to looking for God in all the wrong ways and all the wrong places, and I think. It's time for us to grab back that high ground of God is creator. He's revealed himself. He is not the created object itself, but man, all those molecules everything's made up ultimately of God's original light of let there be. Yeah.
Yeah, so. And you know that people like New Age. I mean, what are they, pantheists or whatever? They think God is creation in a lot of ways, and I mean, so it's like there's an understanding there, but then there's the perversion. I mean, he's in everything, but he's not creation, and but there's still that pull towards it from probably the original mandate, and I don't know. I guess for me, for so long, I prayed the Lord would send me as a missionary to Yellowstone. He's like, no, you get to go to the city.
That's a step beyond wanting to be a missionary to Hawaii.
My beach is actually a mountain and snow, and I can't stand the beach, and so at some level, unless there's mountains at the beach, and I haven't been to Hawaii, so I couldn't relate.
So Yellowstone was my backyard.
Yeah, see, that's.
I mean, crazy blessed to be placed in that. Even my pre-salvation days, I was. It's like God. I always think that God so blessed me that I was filling my files that it would eventually be open toward Him. Yeah, in time.
So when you're in nature and you talk about these just experiencing nature. Like, do you feel like the spirit, like a spirit of revelation, or the Lord just like set on you, and all of a sudden, like, you start creatively thinking, writing? Like, how does that process happen with you?
That's a great question. I mean, sometimes you walk in the woods because it's the woods, and it's a place of rest and contemplation. It's just a general sense. I'll just get antsy during the week and have to go find one of the many parks near Coeur d'Alene, and there's some that have some real water is always involved, it seems. So you're just going there for rest and see what happens, kind of thing. But I always grab a camera because I'm very interested in capturing
moments,
the light, the setups, what I see, and then I have this idea that eventually I'll publish something with photographs and writings. But until then, it's just satisfying enough to look and engage perspective on, water dripping off a leaf or the color of moss or I don't know, I think it was about a month ago, the snows had abated in this one park in Post Falls, Idaho, and I happened on a mother moose and two fairly grown yearlings. And it's not a good idea to walk into a mother moose generally. But I found I was kind of walking with my head slightly down to watch my footing because there were little patches of snow. And then I looked up above me, and there's sort of this rocky, kind of meadowy area. And there's a mother moose and a youngster up there.
And moose are aggressive.
Yes, they are. But, you're careful, but I have, this has happened so many times to me with running in the, like black bear and moose before. I've literally had this happen before, and all I did was just avert your eyes, and it's kind of like the lessons of a trapper, if you're gonna, or a tracker. You kind of avert your eyes. Hunters do this too, and because they recognize the eye gate and levels of emotion, aggressions. They sort of read these things. So I'm just sort of half looking, and then I'm pulling out my camera and waiting for the shot, and so. But it was in all, I didn't write about it yet, but I would write it, frame it in a gift from God.
Yeah.
Because I was actually praying before. I really believe that day I was praying like, boy, I'd like to see something like a moose, and He gave me 3. And so it's this thing about small gifts.
Yeah.
And then you can elaborate on spiritually, intellectually, and go a number of ways. That's fun. But even if someone's reading my stuff, all they can go is, God likes to give gifts even to say, gee, I'd like to see a moose.
Well, I believe it. We had a story, me and my wife, when we moved back here. We moved back in April of 2015 from Columbia. And we had a 4th of July service. And so that afternoon, I took her out to a park in Bossier, North Bossier, around the lake. Yeah. And I told her, I said, you know what? When I was young, they used to have eagles that nested out here. It'd be really cool to see that. They haven't nested out there in who knows how long. So we're literally walking down the trail, and what happens? An eagle comes into this little opening and just is sitting there like flapping its wings, and you're just like, oh my gosh. Huh? It's like, okay, Lord, you hear my thoughts. You hear my prayer thoughts, right? Yeah. And you give those, kisses from a good father. Yeah. Just like, okay.
Yeah. That's all. Like I said, I said it last night. I forget where the quote came from, but the unexamined life is not worth living. And so, wherever you are, always, always, always pay attention, because there's messages everywhere. And there's voices everywhere. But the caveat is, with imagination and with voices, is you're always doing this comparing with the nature of God and.
Well, it's interesting. I was talking with John about this, and sometimes we take for granted that not everyone's as self-aware or thinking introspectively or thinking about things as you are. Not that we're so super. I'm not trying to say we're super aware of ourselves, but I think life distracts us. I think that was what, Thoreau and some of these other people was like the distractions of the pressures of what society puts on you, of the city life, and whatever. Yeah. And you can miss out on a lot of just like, how am I doing? Like, how is my inner man? And what about my relationship with the Lord, or anything like that? And so, I think solitude can help sometimes. What do you do when you don't? What do you do when you don't have a screen in front of you? Right. Especially today.
Yeah, that's really nice too.
So
just use it as a phone.
Yeah.
And a camera.
I know. I keep trying to threaten myself. I'm going to go back to a flip phone, but I've slaved myself
I
to my
say
phone.
that, and my wife just kind of shakes her head.
Yeah, mine too.
You
I mean,
can't do that.
everything I do is on my phone as far as life goes that I have to do.
Yeah.
Bills and whatnot. But so talking about creativity and nature and everything, I mean, that's a big part of what you do. You're a carpenter, right? So
Yeah,
do you still do that actively?
yeah. Actually, I kind of went the route of I had to find a living because there's no jobs for people with their head in the air, being philosophical.
Yeah.
But
Not anymore, at least.
yeah, I mean, so the realities of life is I really didn't have a lot of direction in life, and I don't want to go into the childhood breakage, but I really had no idea what I was supposed to do, who I was, but I ended up doing what my grandfather said. My grandfather was a carpenter, and when I was a kid, I could hang out with him, and he'd let me play with a saw or a hammer, and I watched what he can do with a skill saw and some really basic tools. He can make a built-in cabinet out of birch in our house and did wondrous things. So somehow that stuck, and he even said before he died, "Don't let any of my grandchildren become carpenters." And so I said, I'll ignore that curse and just said, no, that was a blessing.
Yeah.
And so I became a carpenter, but I became the kind of guy that I was always absorbed in minutia, so I'd be doing something difficult in the corner and whatever. And eventually, I went on my own, and I just did a lot of repair work and stuff. So, but when I moved to Montana, I saw this rustic furniture, and I said, "Yeah, you just take stuff out of the woods that I walk through, and peel the poles and make it into something." And it has a really old history of whatever pioneers doing that. And it just so happened that it started to be very popular starting in the 90s of rustic furniture.
Like reclaimed wood furniture, things like that?
Well, that was reclaimed wood would flow into that, but usually it was these lodgepole chairs and beds that were making, and they were very popular. But because I had upbringing with my mom as an artist, my dad incredibly practical, I veered toward the art market, and I started just doing.
Not necessarily the practical, just like you wanted to get creative with it.
I want to get creative, yeah. So I had a grandpa and a dad that were very handy with tools, and so I had that side coordinating with my mom's art education and going to museums and art schools. So when it came to making furniture, suddenly I was doing carvings on wood and combining them with metal and pouring concrete and just doing everything I could mix it with this sort of rustic idea. And I ended up pretty quickly into the art market, into a gallery in Bozeman, Montana.
What's your favorite piece of art to make? Like as far as coffee tables, bed frames, hutches. Just anything really.
Not really, like little tables always get my imagination, but because you can use kind of exposed joinery here and there or something. So my furniture was mimicking a lot of the arts and crafts movement of the turn of the last century that was popular in the 90s. So I sort of hit this thing. So now I went from carpenter to having something that really paid for a while. And I got in a couple of coffee table books and some magazine articles and whatnot. But it was something that fed my imagination. So it's always great when you find a job you love.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That ticks a lot of
boxes. Work, I think, takes on that aspect of worship, which I think was always the intention.
Exactly. Yeah. And if I'm asked to speak on that, I go, I knew moments when in the creative process where you maybe get a little stuck in a flow where that still small voice would come and go, try it this way.
Wow.
Or rethink it this way. Yeah. So I could see when I would be with customers, they would say something and I'd just do a little interview on what they wanted. what attracted them, I don't know, in nature around them or whatever. And I just try to, and I'd be really good at envisioning the whole thing in my mind, coming up with a sketch, and then pretty much just going to work from a sketch, doing a working drawing. And,
Well,
but I wasn't trained for that. I mean, that was like,
you just figured it out,
yeah, pretty much.
or is it
And
like
it was before the internet, so I used to buy
Now
a
I
ton
can-
of books.
yeah,
I buy before
YouTube.
a big explosion of the internet where you knew how to use it, and there was all this information.
Yeah, I mean now I YouTube everything. I mean,
Yeah.
why call a guy to change my alternator? I can watch a video on YouTube
Yeah.
if I got 8 hours.
Yeah.
You know? And
Yeah,
so,
exactly. It's you can dream something now and get all the assist you want.
I know.
It's great.
we don't. We don't realize the advantage that we have, or at least some of us, compared to what it used to be. I mean, I remember my dad buying an encyclopedia. It was the most exciting thing.
Yeah.
It's like those. You talk about something that didn't age well.
Yeah, exactly.
Encyclopedia.
But there it was. And it was your. I don't have to go to the library now.
Yeah. So you know you're in the nature. You're carpentry. You're creative. You're artist. So like another thing you shared a lot this weekend was about inner healing. How did you even get into? Because I'm imagining a guy in the mountains in the valley fishing and walking and talking with the Lord and making chairs or tables. So how did inner healing even come into your picture?
I think the Lord grabbed my sorry heart and drug it across gravel.
Yeah, and you got into it because you needed it, or it's just.
Well, yeah, part of it, but it was kind of a thing where I'd even been spiritually indoctrinated. Like, nah, it's not a real thing. All you need is your salvation and the promises of God,
It's
and you're good.
unfortunate, yeah.
And yeah, in part true, but not true.
Yeah. It's half a coin.
Yeah, confess your faults one to another that you may be healed. And the dimensions of that, weren't really known. So over time it became more and more a reality because I joined Streams Ministries. John Paul Jackson was the head of it then. And
So when did you meet? When did you so what year is that? I asked Lisa the same thing.
yeah, I have to remember to connect this all to inner healing. But it was 2002. I basically 2002. I was bored of being the prophetic guy in church and teaching, and I was going, where's it going to go from here? It's just like, you're in one of these funks, and you're going, Lord, what? And about that time, two things happened. Larry Randolph came to our church with a team, which really impressed me because I was tapping into something else. But one of his assistants looked at me and said, the way you are, the way you act, you should be having dreams. And I said, well, I don't. And he goes, well, you should. And I said, well, I don't. And he said, well, you should. And then I'm thinking like, well, I know a prophetic bump to the question when I hear one. So I had my wife and a friend of ours, Carol, pray for me. And I get 2 God encounters in a week.
Wow.
In the dream realm.
Wow.
I mean, God coming to me as the, I titled it The Kind Policeman that gave me 2 vehicles, a streamlined bus for young people that would get places faster. And it's very spiritual, it's shiny. And then the other one was a VW hippie kind of bus. And I go, okay. That's where I came out of, but I don't know, where that's going to go. So that started, and then the next thing was around that time, I just got on the internet, and I just looked up John Paul Jackson. I'd heard about him. He's one prophet I never explored, and the thing that stood out was they had sent like 40 people or something to the Salt Lake City Olympics and interpreted the dreams for over 150 people in coffee cafes, etc. And I said to the Lord, I want in. I don't care what it costs. I'm going to take all the courses at Streams and have a team of 6 by the end of in 1 year's time.
Wow.
And it happened like clockwork. It really did. It was one of those kind of like God sitting in the heavenlies going, I was waiting for you to say that.
Yeah,
You know, it's-
yeah.
you know, so that got me hooked up with streams, and I fairly quickly became a teacher for John Paul's material, The Art of Hearing God, and the Dreams courses.
Are you a master interpreter? What do they call it? Master teacher? Master.
No,
Master
I'm
dreamer.
like master of none. What we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
Jack of all trades, master of none. I'm okay. You know, I just love the fact that in a dream you could, and I'm cycling back into inner healing now. In a dream, you get this privilege of, with honor and that kind of character that John Paul taught, you get the honor of walking through someone's holy place and holy of holies, their soul and their spirit. And you have to be very careful how you touch these things, because dreams are much more revealing than people could imagine, especially with a Hebraic method of dream interpretation. So in that journey with that, you quickly realize you're touching on healing issues that they would never want to talk about, and maybe sometimes even the roots of the healing issues. And so that was the big seed that got planted in me. So then around that time period, it seemed like the favor dried up in Montana for this budding ministry, or I didn't even know what to call it, but we moved to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
You just said, "Hey, let's go here," or was that?
I was getting invitations
Okay.
to come there and actually coaching a church, like I think every other month for about a year, to how to do what we call prophetic evangelism.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, these people like us, and there's water here. We're kayakers, and there's a lot of water here, so we can do a lot of kayaking, and the people were good. So, you know, basically the impression my wife and I had was the land is kind of like the land is before you. You choose.
Yeah.
I will bless you whatever you do. And yeah. So we moved there. But what I didn't know is John Sanford lives there, the Elijah House, and you know, pioneer in inner healing. And we quickly befriended his daughter, Andrea Barather. Talked her into going to Burning Man. Well, coached her into going to Burning Man with us. But that led into a friendship with John Sanford.
And that's when you started really kind of diving into the inner healing dynamic?
Yeah, it's just sort of God dragging my wounded heart backwards. I'm going, oh, well, I guess I got to do it, you know.
Yeah. Well, you said something this weekend that's so funny. It's like you were like, I didn't want to get into inner healing. It's just, you know, and most people who are in inner healing, that's kind of what they're like. I didn't want to be here.
Yeah.
You know, and then I got drug here.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. It's messy business. It's
When it's scary, like you said, I mean, you're dealing with the inner chambers of people's souls and hearts, and you know, I have a funny story when I started getting into this, and I thought I broke someone. And I'm having a moment ministering to someone, and I said, "Let's pray." And my prayer is literally, "Oh Jesus, oh Jesus, oh Jesus, I broke them. I have no idea what to do. I'm so sorry, God. I broke this person," as they're just in pieces in front of you, and it was because you took them somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, there's a learning curve to everything. And it's like, well, God led me. You know, I always think God led me into places where, you know, I was a master introvert. You know, if I was a master at anything, it was avoiding these
Interactions.
uncomfortable things, you know. So, you know, God in his wisdom knew I needed this, but also, you know, I do some counseling, and I don't do a lot because I really have other interests that I think are more the sweet spots for God. I mean, my writing, for instance.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I do it, but we have so many people into inner healing on our dream interpretation outreach team, and it's never just about dream interpretation, because what does God want displayed to the culture? And one of those important pieces is inner healing. And we can do a certain amount of triage out in the field, you know, when we're meeting people in alternative spirituality, on street kids, or whatever.
So, some people
whoever.
would say, like, why would even you do inner healing for someone who's, in another religion or spiritual view? Like, what would you say to someone who says, why them? Why not the church?
Well,
Maybe a hard question, but I mean, I'm just.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I just think it's all the compassion of Christ.
Yeah.
It's
Do people have
did
to
he come
be,
did he come just to heal physically, or I think he came to touch us in the deepest places of our heart.
Yeah.
And reading between the lines, even the question to the man lame for so many years by was it? Yeah, I'm sorry.
we know what story you're
but he says, "Would you be healed?"
Yeah.
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 Even that is a healing kind of question, and to my mind, like, it's obvious he's wanting to be healed, but what are the reasons going on here that, he's asking these deep questions?
Yeah. This is inner issues. I was listening to Ken Fish was talking about how Mary Magdalene mentions that she traveled with Jesus' ministry and she got healed, delivered of 7 demons. And, his thing, but he believes it strongly. He goes, because it was the inner healing process in her life after being freed.
Yes.
I mean, there's that
and it was
process.
probably, emphasis on the word process, during those 3 years. It makes me wonder, how were the layers unfolded in that story?
Yeah. Well,
because it really is an unfolding of layers for people to reach increasing freedom. And everybody I know that has embraced inner healing knows that that's true. God's yet not done, suddenly
we're all in a process.
Yeah, we're all in a process. Suddenly you wake up one day and go, oh, that is a thing.
And it
is not a good thing.
It kills anything in you that longs for perfectionism, because you can't. Yeah. It's like, it's like even Paul said, I'm not claiming to have attained it.
Yeah.
I'm walking that way.
Exactly.
I mean, that's Paul. And so I'm,
Yeah. It's the same script for all of us.
Yeah.
And that gives you that humility and that sense of, I mean, I can talk to someone who's broken their heart and go, in a way I've been there, maybe not in the same thing, but I can stand before you and say, Jesus can lift that weight off you and put you back together.
When you do inner healing, I mean, there's all these different methods and streams. Do you find it, maybe a strange question, but this is where my mind's going, because it's my question. Do you find yourself inviting the Lord to do something, or do you feel like you're his hands and feet and you say, I'm going to speak into this and see it shift? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, if I think I know where you're going, there's always this sense of overall you're inviting the Lord into every bit of it. But the mechanics of it might look like God saying, all right, now.
Because it's hard to do that when you're talking to people who don't, have a grid for Jesus, or, you're a Burning Man and you need to bring inner healing to something. I mean, I guess you can use different language, let's ask the Spirit, the true Spirit to come.
Right. And this is a good time to segue into the experiences of Burning Man, because at Burning Man, we had a spiritual menu board. And it was just like a kind of a soulish hook, a way to introduce people to, say, gifts of the Spirit or what Jesus can give them in non-religious language. So we had encouraging words or destiny words. We had healing of the body. We had spiritual cleansing and all these things.
Deliverance. Is that what that was? Or inner healing?
No, we didn't want to put deliverance.
No, but
I told the story how,
Is that what spiritual cleansing is? It's like, we're just going to cast some things out of you.
Yeah. Well, it was just like, maybe an introduction to the benefits of forgiveness, just at base level, right? But it was left nebulous enough where people would come in and go, wow, I would like a spiritual cleansing with a destiny word. And so for people in a spiritually hungry setting, while they were in their we had a waiting room, they'd be thinking about these things. But we'd have an encounter team with 2 or 3 of our people, and they were the guests. And the whole thing was, all right, we will escort them like they're honored guests. We would hold their hands to their divine appointment, introduce them, and tell our team what they wanted, as a leader, co-leader. But from there on in, it was like, God, what do you want to do? Because we learned that after a while, we kind of ignored the list. We would cover it eventually, but it started with this conversation. And we had so embraced this kind of mother and fathering role as a reality, even no matter what stage of our growth is. This is a culture that needs to be mothered and fathered. So from that perspective, I mean, you could identify this as a father. You don't always go these 10 steps of this is how I'm going to dad today. You're some scriptures about maybe how to, mold a child or something, but you're really going by that still small voice, that inner sense of prompting. So I think we learned that. It was always, John Wimber said it, it's like you got this Holy Spirit tool belt where they're all available. Our imagery was, I think we got this shelf of a lot of things we could do, but should we do them? And our favorite prayer was, help, Lord.
We talked about that today in class. We're in healing deliverance, and we said a tool is just a tool. It's meaningless unless the Lord empowers it. And so because you can easily get into this formula step of, I got to do this and this and this and this. And I don't know, sometimes the Lord is gracious enough to do something in that, obviously, because there's principles of spiritual principles. But
when you're new at it,
it's
God
great.
will honor, you're doing your 3-step thing. And I think because God knows our immaturity.
It's like a little scaffolding. It helps you when you're new. It helps you when you're, training wheels, whatever analogy you want to use. But, at the end of the day, the thing, and look, we do, I'll have counseling sessions with people. And a lot of times, John's in here sitting over behind Rob. And so they'll sit there and I'll sit down in front of them. And I'm like, I don't even know where to go. But here's what God wants to bring healing to someone, and God will show up, and you don't have to have everything figured out if you're just sensitive and you're willing to have a conversation with someone. And it's amazing how they can have a conversation with you. You have no grid where you're going, and then in the middle of a conversation, the Lord will drop something and be like, that's what you need to talk on, and here's what you need to do.
Exactly.
But it's like willing to have that conversation, because so many times we just want to do the spiritual stuff and get you out of here. And instead of saying, I need to just have a conversation so you feel connected to, you feel heard, you feel like someone cares about you. And it's amazing how in the mundane, if we can call it that, the mundane interaction with someone is where the God encounter is going to appear. And it happens all the time that way.
It's almost like the art of being naturally supernatural. For Burning Man, that was one of the, I think, things that we were graced with, or we learned, or we mastered, was as mothers and fathers of Burning Man, or placed in Burning Man, we built trust very quickly. I always noticed that. And I talked a bit last night, is one of the first things you want to do is make a safe place. And it seemed like, pretty much without exception, we had this way of, we're going to look at them with soft eyes and gentle voices, and try to find that place in their eyes that was made by God, that place in the Spirit, that no matter how broken or how seemingly strange they were, hunger brought them in here. And hopefully some desire to lay it out there, So we would build trust very quickly, like sometimes 10 or 15 minutes. Not always, but the majority of the time, it seemed like that's the way it worked. And I think they were attracted to, wow, we think you're Christians, or we're not sure who you are, but you're listening, like really listening. And we're not feeling judgment. Like a good parent. And we're not feeling judgment.
And we talked about today, when we talk inner healing, we just started our class today, and it is a personal ministry. It's not business, it's personal, and you can only go as far as people are willing to let you in.
Yes.
And so that's why trust matters, because if you're not willing to let us in and we don't build trust through just, hey, I'm listening, I care, I'm not judging, then we can't get into the places where the healing sometimes is walled off or behind all these other layers.
You can only minister to the level that the wall comes down.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're just peeking over, checking you out, spiritually checking you out, and other times they're like, I just love the Burning Man culture because so many were like, the wall is down. Come on in. And I'm going, well, that's maybe a little lack of discernment, but you can, we're not going to go beyond the boundaries.
They have no walls, and that's part of their isures is let's build walls somewhere.
But yet, we would say, all right, we're going to give you we'll flat out say, would you like a spiritual experience? And then wait for the creativity of the Lord to kick in and how we would do that. Is it going to be touch? Is it going to be, some kind of imagery or something? There's a story I like to tell about. We had art, really inspired art. Our artists work hard, and one artist in particular, Andrea. And one year we were talking about what's the art going to be at Burning Man, and I idly suggested wheels within wheels, and then so it ended up.
Were you just throwing out the theme? Most like this will be the hardest thing.
I have this talent of coming up with T-shirt sayings and themes and just random ideas, and so I just said wheels within wheels, and then we were in Coeur d'Alene talking about it, and she ended up decorating in what I called early Ezekiel. She's trying to reproduce a whirlwind and eyes on wheels. And I mean, this was all confirmed by dreams. And we even had a burner in Coeur d'Alene who was coming to get her dreams interpreted at the cafe where we were at when we were mulling this question. And she said, well, I didn't come last week because I didn't have a dream, but this week I came. And then so I had this dream of a wheel rolling across the desert. And then as I was walking down the streets of Coeur d'Alene to get here, I was seeing eyes and wheels. And we're going. And I actually started thinking at this point, because I'm going, most of our prophetic input seems to be coming sideways through the pre-saved that we're about to reach,
That's awesome.
Not just the church. So it was very interesting.
I like that.
So here we got one of the decorations in our encounter tent was the four faces of Ezekiel. We had the eagle, we had the ox, we had the man, and the lion. Mm-hmm. And so the model Andrea used for the face of a man was Jesus that Akiana did, but she did it in this like kind of wispy fabric, like silk. So it was just this nice shadowy figure, but it was very much like these piercing eyes of Jesus. Mm. So at one point in this 3-hour encounter with this guy from San Francisco, his name's Will, and he's very open about his testimony now, how Burning Man affected him. But she took Will over to that face of Jesus in the art and said, I'd like you to introduce you to something. And he took one look at it, and he just fell to the dust, fell to his knees, and was weeping. He goes, I saw that face on the playa as I was coming in, and man, oh man, there are there's never finer moments than that sort of thing, where all this conversation and all this nurturing and then this encounter all coalesce
into this moment.
Yeah, and my wife's got her arm around him, and she's explaining, yes, it's Jesus that's been pursuing you, and on, So
you can't orchestrate that.
You
that's
can't.
Just,
you can't.
You have a master.
And you can't say, do it again.
I mean, he's the creator. He creates these moments of just everything, like you said, coalescing and coming together in these points of just these powerful points in our lives. And I mean, that alone will make you sit and wonder in awe. I mean, just.
It did, yeah. Wow. And again, the spin-off of we're very much into creativity, and we've been involved in creative teachings and events and stuff to promote creativity as are others. It's a thing in the body of Christ. There's something in the spiritual atmosphere about people rediscovering and getting free and expressing God in more of this multidimensional Ephesians 3:10, and now the polyvariegated wisdom of God is being on display, both within us and without us from the church, So the age-old question is, art has always been creative, but where is the church? We're starting to explore, I think we're working on some answers,
Well, you guys, when I was having a conversation, and someone's like, it's like modern mystics this weekend, in the good sense, not the bad sense. But it's that, well, what is a mystic? It's someone who's trying to find the places where they encounter the Lord. I mean, you don't take out.
Thank you for defining it, because there's always this nebulous false starts about mystics, and it always seems to go sideways because it's not grounded in biblical truth.
No,
or the
because
nature
it's
of
about
God.
encountering the Lord in whatever ways possible, and so I mean, it's like they're more encounter based than they are word based, and so but you guys aren't that, but. It's like you're word-based, but you say, hey, but he can still encounter us in all these avenues, and other people can encounter him all these other avenues and whatever expressions.
Yeah.
And so it's exciting because it's like fresh. It's like, a renaissance for the church at some level where it's different. And
I think it's one of the most exciting things, and I'm just really sort of. Well, I think, my wife and I, and there's a creative team in our church, and I'm part of Streams has a little branch called Streams Creative House, where Charity Bowman Webb from Scotland heads it up. In fact, I'll be there next weekend with her doing an event called Tabernacle. So, where was I going with that? But anyways, it's exciting times, and for me, just this little segment of creative writing and bringing a spoken word to the pulpit and the worship service. I feel pretty excited and privileged to have a little piece of that, and then to start a writers group that is not only are they gifted 20-somethings, 30-somethings. I'm glad I got one 50-year-old-ish guy who has an English degree. If we need him for help,
grammar, syntax,
all that stuff. But it's so fun to hear the diversity of expression, and we've got a singer-songwriter with us now too. To hear that, and then their willingness to make it public. And my pastor's one of them. He's always writing now during worship, and a good percentage of the time he's going to bring something up there.
Spoken word, or just like poetry, or just like phrases, or anything.
Like a genuine little spoken word, and he does the rhyming. I can't do rhyming. I just look for flow and emotion and all these other things. But those, the younger generation is.
Well, John's the rhymer. We let John do the rhyming.
Yeah.
It's like his gift.
Yeah.
And so he walks around rapping his rhymes, and we just listen
right.
for the wisdom of God on it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's.
But it's brought me into, I'm an older generation guy, and I'm amazed that, this stuff has a beat, and it has the feel of maybe the streets or the people, young people today,
That person's life is in it. You can feel who they were, where they walked, or whatever. And I love stories. Like, I've seen the power that, like, I think we're created to receive stories. Like stories are almost like they help our walls kind of go down. Yeah. But they convey something, a message. Yeah. And so I love stories. It's almost like it's a way to get into someone's inner wall without them suspecting, because so many people are just passive listeners, and they're just letting things that they hear come in. They don't always have those guards up. And I've seen the power of stories, just even in evangelism, just to be able to switch an atmosphere. And people who had never been receptive, you tell them a story that's not, laced in religious terms, and then you connect it, and it's just like it shatters them.
Right.
And so I love.
And we look to Jesus. We have no, we don't have to look very far to know.
No.
you know.
The Bible's
And-
full of stories.
Yeah, full of
Just
stories.
change the things around, but
Yeah.
convey the same message.
Yeah,
You know.
and that Hebraic way of parables where he's not going to make it easy on you.
No.
You're going to have to meditate. You're going to have to ponder. You're going to have to go home.
It's like my wife's dreams. I mean, they're just
Yeah.
they're
Exactly.
complicated plots. You know.
Yeah, that brings up another point. I think we're recovering this attraction and even the reality of being comfortable about the mysteries of God.
Yeah.
There are some things that we know they're just going to be unknowable till some future point of being on the other side. But yet that doesn't stop us because it's it's.
But you know, it's funny because, and I know y'all you have an appointment you got to be at soon, so we got to end here in a minute. But there's like this rediscovery in the theological realm of Eastern theology, the Eastern Church,
Right.
and so they are very comfortable with mystery and not understanding.
Yeah.
And so it's like that's starting to trickle in a little more even into the Protestant theology.
Yeah.
And it's like saying, hey, you know what? We don't have to understand this, but we know this is the Lord and we're going to push into it. And, you know, we're just going to be sensitive to if it gets off, we'll try to recorrect. But the Eastern Church is all about mystery. I mean, you hear them try to explain things, and it's frustrating to the Western Church mind. You're like, no, systematize, categorize, delineate, give me definition. And so, and they're like, well, you know, vaguely they ramble on about what the atonement, you know, the atonement is. They don't tell anything about the atonement. They say, well, it's just a prelude to the resurrection, you know, and it's like, okay, I need more. But they're okay with mystery. And so I think that's the big thing is you have to be okay with mystery and not understanding. But that's where I feel. I
think we bit the apple of rationalism during the 1800s, or even before that, the 1700s, and it little did we know, you know, coming out of France, a lot of the philosophies how they affected the church, and you know, so we get down to the early 1900s where. You know, even the study of dreams, you know, one Bible dictionary says it's the realm of the delusional or something. You know, so we're gaining back this ground of being comfortable with knowing, probing into these mysteries of God. But it also is a nexus with the spiritual culture. They want to know the mysteries of light, and they sometimes stumble upon these little half-truths, and then they extrapolate into something that doesn't give life or is pantheism, polytheism, something. And we should hold, let's just take light, for example, we should hold the high ground of understanding light. God is light. And then he goes a step further and says, those that follow me, you are the light of the world. What does that mean? What does that mean? You know, all these things that the culture's hungry for, and they're a little surprised that we don't know.
Yeah.
You know,
As
they
much
have
as
no
they
grid.
think
They have no grid on what's in the first chapter of John.
Yeah.
God is light. God is love. God is spirit. God is life. I always like to break. What if we broke down the essentials of the nature of God back into those four things, and talk about that, and then we ramp them up for the ultimate expression, Jesus Christ, you know? And that's a lot of what we do in some ways.
Well, and so many of them are just looking for, you know, they don't want the definition as much as the experience. You know, it's like they get an experience and they're like, I know what light is now. I know who light is now, right?
Yeah, it's really true.
And so it's just
an experiential
knowledge. And as you know, it's the knowledge, you know, that it's the experience that goes beyond knowledge. And so I think that so much of the Christian life is meant to be lived and experienced, and we've tried to theologize and define it. And I think the New Age and the Burning Man, and you guys have been pioneering that now for years, and in that community, I mean, they understand it better than the church does. The church is stuck in theology and words, and there's experiences to be had. You know, like we always say, I say, the two doors. John always says this: knowledge and experience.
Yeah,
you gotta have them both.
Yeah, I think they're comfortable with the freedom to be hungry.
Well,
we're scared of it.
yeah. Well, because we don't want to mess up or fall into
Yeah.
heresy or be stoned by the guy sitting next to us in church. But I know we got to close. But because you're a carpenter, I thought it'd be a good idea to bust out. I have this this thing I made in wood tech class that I want you to grade. And so if you could just look at this and tell me what grade would you give this? I mean, and I'm primitive, but you're the master carpenter.
Right away, I want to start. How can you
Look, because I was like, maybe you can start selling these at Burning Man. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe to fund your.
Yeah, I think you can make a buck here somewhere.
Okay.
I don't know how.
Look at this. Look. Okay, this is the scene. Okay, and I don't know if the camera can catch this, but do you want the tomb? Are we after Ascension Day? Or is he?
Oh man, now you're turning it.
Look at that. Look at that.
Yeah.
Is that too? Is that
Yeah.
too? Is that too much for burning? Like, just too obvious? What if
Yeah.
you just did this without the cross, but you did that? That would be pretty. Like, people would be like, "What does that mean?
Yeah, could be.
What does that mean?"
It's really interesting.
Okay, but seriously, like, what grade would you give this?
Yeah.
Like, if you were a teacher.
Gosh, I don't know. I'm a mercy gift, so I wouldn't offend anybody. I'd probably give you a B plus. just
I
go
think
away.
I got a 95. I'm just saying. I
fear,
think I got a
man.
95.
Right.
But okay. So maybe you're not as merciful as you think, Rob. But okay. All joking aside, do you know what wood that is?
I don't know. It looks like pine or something.
Gosh, that was too easy. Because what else are you gonna get? You
I
get
don't-
pine
I
here.
don't know.
Anyway, well,
It's easy to carve. It's your kids will like that.
yeah, that's
It's
what.
good stuff.
I was hoping to sell
good
it as like a one of a kind, like.
Put it on a chain and wear it around your neck. Yeah.
You know what? I never thought about that, but I
You
think
should
that
do
would
that.
be
You
unique.
should probably. I think you could rock that.
I'll frame it, and that way I'll put
And
the
then put it
chain,
around your
and
neck.
then I can move it, and it'll
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
Anyway, well,
Yeah.
Rob, it's been a blessing having you today. I know you guys got to run out to another meeting, but before we go, can you pray a Father's blessing over everybody here or everyone who's watching,
No.
and then we'll break it from there.
Yeah. Okay, so Father, it's always good to just evoke your name. Father, I always think of Father of every fatherhood named in tribes, nations, flows of generations. Your name is Father over all this connection of even community. You're a father sitting in this expanded living room, watching over even what we can perceive a mess. And as a regard of whether you're far away or you're near, Father's voice is really, come unto me. Come unto me. I really will give you rest. I'll find ways to still the heart and bring you in. And I'm going to bless those here that may be struggling, that haven't had this connection with Father, haven't known Father. He's been absent. Maybe he wasn't the kind of father that was in your deepest parts of your heart as a child you imagine the Father should be. I just want to just speak out of the realm of God the Father himself. He's not like the mistakes that broken men have maybe made. And he's a Father that's willing to hold you, receive you, speak peace, be still over your hurts, speak blessing, particularly over your design and your purpose. And so bless you from the moment of conception to all the stages of your life. Bless you. Let the I love you of a Father who sent his Son. He so loved the broken world, he sent his Son. That's the kind of love he continues to put out there, even in nature. I love you just the way you are. And I'll work with that. I'll bring you to growing stages, and I'll make you fathers and mothers of your culture, your families, your circle of influence. So we just seal all these things in the name of the Father. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen, amen. Well, Rob, thank you so much. Man, there's so many things we didn't talk about that I wish we would have.
Yeah.
The sheep, the elk, everything.
Laughing at more silly things.
Yeah.
Would have been good.
Yeah, no. But I enjoyed it, and so we're very grateful and honored to have you. And so thank you for coming. And
Thank
everybody, thank you for watching. If you like this, please like it, subscribe, click that bell on, and we look forward to seeing you next episode. See you later.